Good morning, everyone. I am Ann Koontz. Today is Tuesday, August 4th. Today, we are delighted to have a super amazing, fantastic guest. We have Whitney Harper, who is the Chief Executive of Operations for ADVOS Legal. Her firm is another law firm which is doing things differently, just like we are. And I came to know Whitney through another lawyer friend of mine who was like, you guys are similarly minded, you really should meet. And we've had some really interesting, fantastic conversations. As a result of that, I wanted to invite Whitney to come and join us today. And her firm handles a lot of business and HR matters, also some intellectual property. So they're very similar, but very different at the same time. So we really appreciate your time. Very grateful that you've joined us. Can you tell us, Whitney, just a little bit about yourself and anything I might have omitted that you want everybody to know?
You know, I think you nailed it with, super fabulous, right?
Super fabulous is definitely true.
No, thank you. I'm so glad to be here. And really very cool for us at ADVOS to find other lawyers and other firms who are practicing differently. We really do believe that it doesn't have to suck to be a lawyer or to hire one. Right? Right? So it's really it's fun for me to meet people who are like-minded and neat to be able to kind of participate on a webinar with you and know that we're kind of talking to an audience of people who really appreciate that approach.
Exactly. So we're going to be talking today about how your business needs to be moving forward through this new COVID environment, what to do if someone in your business tests positive, an employee, a customer. How do we handle those things? And Whitney can walk us through some of those challenges. Be mindful, guys, that you can use the chat box at the bottom to submit any questions that you have, and I'll be able to fire them off to her. It's going to be a little bit like Stump the Swami. This also will be recorded and distributed afterwards. So if you want to play this back, because I promise you, she's a fantastic wealth of information, and that's very true. It doesn't need to suck to talk to a lawyer. That's so sad, but true.
It's funny. We this evening actually we're gonna meet. We quarterly sit down with our clients who are members of our firm. We sit down with them and talk about kind of their big plans, and very often get to do it over cocktails and have a little fun with it. So
that's nice.
That's nice too, right? Doesn't have to suck.
Can I come?
It's just a short drive up the road. No
there
problem.
You go. Perfect.
Yeah.
So let me first start with how are you seeing your business clients? And keep in mind, Whitney, what's the typical business client look like for you? So that everybody here has kind of an idea how they fit.
Great question. We, ADVOS serves as outside general counsel for growth stage companies, right? So it's a little hard to say size of company or industry, because it really is more about the positioning and kind of the attitude of the company than it is about the size or the industry or the number of employees or the revenue or any of those things.
It's a mindset.
Yeah, it really is, right? So we've had clients, for instance, who are pre-revenue, who've been great clients, who worked really well in our model because they were trying to get up to some big things very quickly, and they needed some really good guidance around that. Things like raising capital or trying to figure out sort of how to enter a new market. We've also had clients who, actually the guys who we're going to have drinks with tonight, are a third generation company that's taking something that, if you looked at their industry, you'd say that is a dinosaur industry. Like, what are you doing there? And they are bringing it forward into e-commerce and doing some really cool things with it. But it's a third generation company that you wouldn't say like, oh yes, that's a growth stage company, right? So it's really about companies that are trying to achieve some things in a relatively short time frame, but that could be a 5-year time frame. It could be 6 months, right? So it's a model that allows us to work together with our clients on the pace and at the resource level that makes sense for them. and still do it in a way that is proactive, right? So we can say, where are you headed? What do you need to be thinking about right now? So that when it's time for you to get where you're going, you're prepared. But also allows us the flexibility to deal with the stuff that's going to come up, right? We know that crap happens in business, right? The thing that you were not expecting, good or bad,
right,
it's going to pop up, and it's going to mean that we've got to shift priorities. And so the way that we work with our clients is flexible enough to help us handle those things as they pop up, but also still keep our eye on the longer term initiatives.
And you can't lose sight of that. You can't lose sight of the foundation. If you end up fighting fire every day, then no one is charting the course. No, you're just off in left field, and you don't even, because you've just responded to the emergencies, what's urgent, not necessarily what's important.
Precisely. And at the same time, you can't, as a growth stage business, you cannot set the path today and stick to it in a super wooden way when opportunities are going to arise that are going to permit you and require you to make some adjustments that you might not even have known would be possible for you. So there's sort of both sides of that spectrum. And COVID, frankly, has been one of those things for a lot of our clients. We've had a lot of clients where they sort of held their breath as the pandemic hit and thought that it was going to be the end or nearly the end for their business, but it has turned into an enormous opportunity for them, right? And we've had businesses on the other side of that too, where they thought they would be fine, and it turned out that their business shut off and has come back at a trickle, but not in a really meaningful way yet. And we're helping people kind of see how to navigate those pieces all along the way.
Have you seen a big shift where maybe your clients are in growth stage, so they're probably more open-minded to changing the way they do things and really looking at efficiencies? I feel like with even our own firm and with our clients, COVID has really forced you to take a hard look at your inefficiencies and your lack of systems and processes where you thought you had a well-oiled machine until everybody went home in 48 hours and then you saw where the hiccups were.
Yeah, it's been really eye-opening for a lot of our clients. Our firm has always been very remote friendly. So we've always had at least one person in our firm who was working from someplace where they could not be part of our brick and mortar experience. And so we've kind of from the start managed by deliverables and objectives instead of FaceTime, which is easy to do when you're not billing by the hour, right? When you bill by the deliverable and a membership based on deliverables, that it's more inherent to our business. So it's been kind of interesting for us because we've been able to, not just as lawyers, but as business partners, help our clients to think through, okay, I can't see my people today. How do I know if they're doing the thing they're supposed to be doing? How do I help my managers manage? Right? That's been the biggest shift that I've seen, is this sort of middle management layer. To the extent
there's no training with respect to this.
They have, the way they've always done it, and now that's sort of evaporated. Or been made very different, and then you start pulling people back into the office, right? So you go from, okay, everybody's remote because we have to be, and so either we're figuring out how to thrive in that or we're suffering through, but we're all remote now. And then you start to pull people back to the office, and some of the things that you thought or you said were necessary about how your employees did their jobs have now been shown to be potentially completely false, or at least open to adjustment, right? And so now you've got to navigate that piece, which becomes really interesting as well.
So what do you see the clients having concerns about when they're raising those concerns, to say, okay, I have to manage differently. I have to manage my middle manager, or if in a smaller company where they're directly managing the staff, how do you help people navigate through that? Do you train them on the management style, or how does that look like?
It's a lot of conversation. It's a whole conversation. You and I have talked about this. We've built a kind of software platform that's customized to our business, but sometimes giving people a demo of here's how we measure it here's how we see what people are doing, just helps people to kind of formulate an idea, right? It helps people think through differently what the ways that they might be able to plug that in their business could be. So we've done a bit of that. Some of it really is from the legal perspective, helping people think through the analysis of what is it really that you're concerned about?
Mm-hmm.
And what is it something that is really like a legit concern? And there is some of that, right? The most surprising one to me is we have a client who is working in a very advanced technology field, right? So software, it's not hardware, right? They're in a software field.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd have thought like, oh, you guys are going to be the ones who have no concern about everybody being remote because your whole job is like in this little piece of metal that I can fit under my arm, right? Like that's it, right? No problem. And they have been the most vocal about the fact that having their people together live in a room speeds up and makes their work more productive, but also more creative.
From like a whiteboard kind of brain dump.
And yes, you can whiteboard remotely, but when you have a team who's used to working together and being physically present in the same room and the interaction, kind of the way ideas bounce off of people and that kind of thing, that's harder to do if you're going to.
There's a dog in the background and the kids. Right. And the lawnmower.
Today, right? None of that, no. Right, but the interesting thing too is then when you go to some people being remote and some people not, I think it almost makes it harder than everyone being remote, right? And so just some of those shifts have been tough for people to work through. But
the other part of that is when they got forced home, there was no choice. So now that you can reassess and say, well, we've had some folks who have said, you know what, I found it really great. I really enjoyed working from home. I found it more productive. There was less office chatter. And then we had a couple people who were like, oh my God, get me back in the office. Like the dog, the family, the lawnmower, whatever's going on, the Amazon guy, like I don't want to be home. So that hybrid model you may see, at least for the long short term.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I think a big part of the guidance that we're seeing, employers have to balance, as they always have in all sorts of situations, they've got to balance the safety of their workforce with the business productivity, the profitability, the market desirability of their business, right? And so they have sort of these competing things, and not just safety of workforce, but also desirability of the work environment, right? So you have I've got to make it something people want to be part of, and I've got to keep my people safe. And in some cases, you might say, okay, well, the flexibility, the ability to work from home or that kind of thing is desirable. And in other cases, to your point, there are people who are like, no, I would like a place to go that does not involve my spouse and children and the dogs and the chickens and the whole nine, right? So employers are having to navigate all of that. And we're in this weird spot right now where the part where the employer says, hey, you've got to come to the office to do your job, which used to be sort of a given, now becomes potentially a safety hazard.
Yeah.
Right. And it's a different safety hazard depending on who you're talking to. Right. So one employee might be perfectly comfortable coming in and actually fairly safe because there's someone who goes into their own office and they sit and they don't need to go interact with other people. They're not, they've got their space and they're in it. And then another employee might have a compromised family member or might just be more susceptible to the stress and the concern about the pandemic conditions. Or it might be someone who, maybe they're the person who takes the mail around the office and has to interact with every person in the place. And so you just have all these different concerns that are competing. And the other side of this is employers, thankfully, the client base that we work with tend to be employers who genuinely do care about their people, right? And because of that, they tend to know a lot about their employees. Mm-hmm. And that, as an employer, actually becomes kind of dangerous, right?
Really?
From a quality perspective, the fact that you know, because you were having a weekend picnic with someone and they mentioned that they are watching their sugar and you got to talking about it and realize they're diabetic, right? Now you know they have a health condition. And because you care about them, you might say to them, hey, I don't know, but does your diabetes make you more susceptible to COVID? And if it does, I think you should work from home, right?
Wow.
Now, as an employer, you've created the potential for someone to say, hey, in 6 months when I don't get the promotion that I thought I was up for, and it goes to someone who didn't need to stay home during COVID, I'm going to feel like that happened because I was seen as being disabled.
Wow.
Right? So you create some liability because you have this care and concern for people. And because you were trying to do the other thing that the law requires, which is to keep your employees safe. It's a really, it's a touchy time for employers and for employees, right? Everybody's trying to navigate it. And I genuinely, I believe that there is a high degree of good faith in all of this, right? Nobody's trying to make decisions that are going to be harmful to the people who are in their workforce, right? If I'm an employer, I need my workforce who already knows how to run my business healthy and working and like feeling great about what I'm doing, right? So if I'm like thinking about sending someone home, or if I'm whatever I'm doing that because I want the best for them and for my business.
Right.
But it can create some sticky situations for sure.
So that's an interesting angle. What about your requirement as an employer to make accommodations for your staff if the diabetic person comes to you and says, hey, Whitney, I have diabetes. I'm not comfortable being here. You're not telling her you think she should work from home, but she's coming to you and saying, I want to work from home. Do you have to allow that?
That's actually the way you want this conversation to go.
Okay.
So as an employer, there's sort of a hierarchy of how you think about this, right? So the first thing you need to do as an employer is make sure that the environment you've provided at the office is going to be safe. Mm-hmm. And if there's hey, I actually don't care if you come in or you work from home and you can be just as effective either place, you can give your people that option if it's appropriate in your environment. Mm-hmm. But for people who are going to be in the office or who are going to be interacting with your customers or out in the field, right? You might have a field salesperson who's not in your office, whose job it is to go visit customers. You need to be thinking about what the risks are in those jobs and how do you protect your people from them, right? So it might be physical barriers, right? Putting up a plastic shield like they've got at Publix for the cashiers, or providing masks or those kinds of things where that's appropriate. But it might also just be relaxing the, how many times you need to see people in person versus what you can do with a phone call or that kind of thing. So you've thought through all those things. But what you're not doing is saying, hey, I've heard this thing is worse for people who are over 65. I think you're that old, so I'm going to tell you, I think you should stay home. We've had a bit of that, right? So we've had some people asking, got some older workforce here. I think I need to send them home. No, you don't. You want to wait for them to come to you, whether it's a disability or an age issue or a family member who has an issue. You want that employee to come to you. You want to make it clear that if someone has an issue, they should come to you, right? If they've got a concern. And then you are sort of in the instance of the person who has a condition and they think they need to not be in the workplace. They still can work, but they can't be in the workplace. You need to think about this like an ADA concern, right? So you go through the reasonable accommodation process, and it is a question of, can you accommodate them such that they can still do their job with that accommodation. And that accommodation is not an undue hardship on your business, right? So one accommodation, right? You go to the absurd side of it. Well, if you can't be in an office with other people, am I required to go rent out an individual office space for you? No,
right.
Undue hardship, right? That is sort of an absurd cost per person to go do that. However, am I required to let you telework? Maybe. If your job is assembling a car on a manufacturing line, probably can't do that before, right? That wouldn't work. But if your job is like mine, right? If you are interacting with clients by phone, doing everything on a laptop, right? You're pretty remote friendly. Sure. Can I still require that employee to hold regular work hours, to present themselves professionally, to have a workplace free from distractions? Absolutely. Right. So it doesn't mean that you have to sort of like throw it all to the wind and let people work when they want and from where they want.
They're still required to uphold those quality standards.
Right. For instance, ADVOS is a law firm, and we take very seriously our duty to protect the confidentiality and privilege of the information our clients have provided to us. My team can work remotely, right? We have the technology and the processes for that. Can they go work in Starbucks and have a conversation with a client at the Starbucks about a sensitive matter? No. No, right? So as an employer, you've got to put some boundaries in there that make sense. It does require you to think a little more, right? Easier when people are in your office, on your internet, on a device where you can see what they're doing. It's easier to control the security, the quality, the professionalism, the kind of all of those things.
And to your point, when you talk about certain industries, legal, medical, accounting, where there's professional licenses and confidentiality is a must, you have some other federal privacy laws to be mindful of. The file can't be rolling around on the back seat of your car and then you roll into the car wash. And I don't think people necessarily appreciate that when they're transporting and the things that are sitting at home and the manner in which files are stored.
Yeah.
Obviously, more than for right. Than probably the average schmo, but still, those kind of things are something to be mindful of.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? Because I think people have a tendency to kind of guardrail to guardrail, right? Have the reaction of, I can't let my people work from home. They're going to be in their pajamas all the time, and they're going to be unproductive, and I'm going to be paying them for hours that they're not really working. And that's where, going back to the conversation earlier about how do you manage remote teams, really talking through with clients about setting clear expectations, things that are really good practices for employers, both from a legal and from a practical business outcome perspective to begin with, become really important now, right? So as a lawyer, right, I would say, hey, you as an employer are better off if you've been really clear with your employees about what the expectations are, because then it's really easy to tell an employee who isn't meeting those expectations, what did I expect?
And where did you land?
Hear about it? Did you meet it? Did you not? And this is why we're done, right? So those conversations around terminations or kind of disciplinary actions become a whole lot easier when the expectations are clear. Just like the management of the employee who is performing well becomes easier, right? Easier for the employee and for the employer. So I think this whole thing is just sort of, it's causing a really interesting shift in a positive way for a lot of businesses, because they are forced to manage in a way that treats us all like adults, lets us all kind of be our best, or find the way out.
And one of the interesting byproducts of exactly what you've described is now take it a step further. It's not just about managing your existing team, but think about the next time you go to hire and you don't have that archaic laundry list of job duties, but rather when you're looking for a team member, you're very clear about how will you know, Susan, that you did a good job. Here's how you will know if this is working. And that's so much different of a read when you post that job ad on Indeed or wherever to actually get a better candidate from the front end. And that's something we've tried to implement ourselves and also coach our clients through. And it's so different because people are accustomed to that, must be able to do this, must have 5 years of this, must. That doesn't tell me, do you need to be detail oriented? Do you need to, are you a big picture person? Are you this? Are you that? Those character traits are far more important than the task list.
Yes. And a good candidate, by the way, like, is the person who's going to ask you, how am I going to know?
Mm-hmm.
And how will you know if I'm exceeding your expectations?
Yeah.
Right. And they don't want the answer to be, I'll know it when I see it. Right.
Right.
They want the answer to be, here's the list, right? Here are the expectations for your role. And here's the water line. And if you're great, here's where you're going to be. Right.
Yeah, because the old days it said, must be proficient with QuickBooks.
Right.
Now, maybe it's going to say, must manage accounts receivable reports and have them, provide them biweekly. Or, you think about the manner in which you convey that information. And that's something people should have been working on anyways, that it's easy to be busy running the business and easy to be busy fighting the fires and not get to that. So I think, when you open, you said I expected this conversation to be much more negative. Like, here's how COVID is ruining your life. But it's really an opportunity to grow much deeper, bigger roots in the business to have a much stronger foundation going forward. So we really owe it a thank you for those that survive.
For sure.
Because then it's not survive, it's thrive. And you weren't even planning on it.
Is there some hardship? Absolutely.
For sure.
I'm absolutely not going to try to sugarcoat that fact.
Yeah.
This has been a really tough time for a lot of businesses.
I mean, look at the entire hospitality. There's nothing, restaurants, like hotel, venues, sports, all of the cultural arts and nonprofits, all of that. But the rest of the businesses that are doing either stable now, because at least the panic is over of,
what is it?
What's going to happen? What's this going to look like? And then PPP, and then, oh my gosh, PPP. I still have PTSD from the PPP. But you get people kind of over that initial fear into survival, and now they're grasped on and they're paying more attention to the business in more strategic ways, which is so helpful.
I think that's absolutely right. And I think it's an opportunity for growth. It's an opportunity for people to think, even if they aren't executing on it, people are thinking differently about their business, right? We had one business that client of ours that really was focused on software and hardware solutions, both, but solutions for the cruise industry, right? And they came into the year like, here, this is going to be our best year ever. We're going gangbusters after the cruise industry, and some hospitality industry stuff too, right? And then, hey, there's a pandemic, and the worst of it is if you're on a cruise ship, right? It really, like, for that client, right? They took a sharp breath in, right? Like, oh, that's not good. They've had a huge pivot, and they've been able to take a solution that they were building for the cruise industry for a different issue and pivot that into something that allows, as events become a thing again, allows venues to help make sure that people who are coming into the event are COVID negative.
Yeah.
Right. So, like, they've had this huge pivot that's going to be tremendous for them. And it was because they sort of, out of necessity, had to pause and say, okay, well, I'm dead in the water. What am I going to do with this team, with this, this whole thing I've got going? So good stuff there, for sure.
That's, in the cruise industry too. I mean, holy smokes, there are definitely businesses, I don't want to downplay that are just being decimated. But if you do run a business and you have someone on your team that tests positive, what's your recommendation?
Yeah. So the first thing that I find myself sort of reminding people of is that individual privacy is still really important. So for a lot of people, actually we're seeing kind of both sides of it, right? So some employers, their first reaction is, I want to go tell everyone that it was, Joanne who has COVID. So that if they were around her, they know and they can go do what they need to do. That information is not, the fact that it was Joanne is not the employer's information share, right? On the other side of the spectrum, we've had some employers who've said, I don't want anyone to know that anyone here had COVID. I don't want to tell anyone, right? Also problematic, because I was sitting next to you and you had COVID. I probably need to know so that I can take some precautions so that I can see if I have it, but also so that I can protect the people that I love, right? So we gotta find the middle ground there, and neither of those two things is the answer. So we'll start there.
What not to do?
Right. No one has the immediate reaction of just like, let me just shoot the middle here. But first thing to do, if you've got somebody who is physically in your workplace who either has symptoms or tests positive, you need to get them separated from other employees and you need to send them home.
Okay.
So, kind of, if you just think about like disaster response, it's step one, let's isolate and get the person out of the workplace. You don't want to do that with a ton of fanfare, right? Like, again, privacy, respecting people's kind of health information, right? But you want to do it quickly, right? So that's step one. Step two, and again, if this happened and someone was in the workplace, so there's a whole other sector of what do we do if somebody's been working from home, right? Which is a whole lot easier to deal with. But step two, if they've been in the workplace, you want to follow the CDC guidelines around the cleaning and decontamination of the space where they work, like the physical area. So, if it's somebody who has their own office, that's a pretty easy answer, right? Like, you're going to clean that space and you're going to rope it off and not let anybody in for a period of time. The CDC's recommendation there is you want to wait 24 hours after the person was last in that space to clean it really well, and then basically rope it off for 7 days. Now, what they're not saying is close the door, right? So they want open air so that the space is circulating and kind of decontaminating itself. But that one I thought was interesting, that you think, I'm gonna close the door so nobody comes in.
Right. Also that you have to wait 24 hours until they've been there. You'd think you'd want to clean that right away.
Right. So it's for the health of the people who are going to do the cleaning.
Gotcha.
You want to get 24 hours for anything that might be circulating in that space to kind of settle, then get in and clean it, then give it 7 days, let it ventilate before you have people back in that space. So, sorry, my contractor's knocking on my office door.
Welcome to work from home life.
This is work from home life. It's a thing, right? So you clean the space, and then you are going to kind of take the next step of figuring out who has been in contact with that employee and notifying them, sending them home, right? So again, this is easier if it was the person who has their own office. But if it's the person who sits in a call center, or who, you've got a cafeteria and people are like in and out of your cafeteria space or conference rooms or that kind of thing, you're going to have to do some thinking about where was this person. And so, you kind of have to go through that process. And then you're going to let them know that they may have been exposed to COVID-19, right? That they were in contact with an employee who has either shown up as symptomatic or who has tested positive. But you're not going to tell them who the person was, right? In some workforces, it's going to be really obvious, right? Hey, there are 3 people who sit in this office. 2 of us are still here. 1 of us went home, right? Guess it was that person. But in other places, it's not going to be as obvious. And either way, if that person wants to share the news, fine. But if they don't, it's their news to share or not. Your job as the employer is to let people know that they've been exposed to a hazard, right? So you're letting people know that they've been exposed, and then you are telling them to go home for 14 days, right? So that part, I think a lot of employers weren't really thinking through, okay, well, if someone was exposed, I think people were kind of thinking like, I'll just send them to get tested. No problem, right? You want to send them home for 14 days because it's going to take some time for symptoms to potentially show up, for the virus to show up in their body. And so they're going to go sit, right? Now, maybe they're teleworking.
Mm-hmm.
And again, if telework's an option for you, this whole thing gets a whole lot easier on the employer and the employee.
Right.
But they need to not be in the workspace. The interesting thing here is that 14-day period may actually be longer than the period during which the infected person has to stay home.
Really?
Yeah. So the next question everybody's going to ask is, how do I know? Oh my goodness. Sorry. How do I know when the person who was initially infected can come back? Right? So they got sick, they were at work, I sent them home. How long do they have to be gone? So two kind of ways to deal with that. One is if the person was symptomatic, then you're going to either take a symptom-based strategy or a test-based strategy. And again, all of this is coming from the CDC's guidance, which they may update, but for now, this is what they're telling us is the right way to handle it.
This is today. Come back tomorrow.
Yeah, and we do have all of this kind of summarized on our website under news and a link to the CDC stuff. So you're welcome to go check that out or just go directly to CDC.
We'll include that too in the recording when we email it out to everybody. We'll include a link to your page.
Very cool. So symptoms or tests. What we're finding is that most people are going to take the symptom-based approach because testing has been slow, right? So a lot of people are saying, hey, I'm trying to get a test and it's taking me, we had someone recently who I think it took 16 days to get his test results and he couldn't test for almost a week to begin with. So, at that point it's been a month since you last had COVID. Mm-hmm. By the time you get your results. So that's not useful.
You can have it again before they figure out if you had it or not the first time.
By the time you get your results. So the symptom-based strategy is basically saying it needs to have been at least 72 hours since you had no fever without the use of fever-reducing medications, and your respiratory symptoms have improved, and at least 10 days since your symptoms first appeared. So this is where you could have somebody who shows up today, becomes symptomatic, you send them home, they don't have any more symptoms, or they have some symptoms, but it clears up after a little bit. 10 days from today, that person comes back and they're fine, but the people who they were sitting next to in your call center still have another 4 days of self-quarantine to go because you had to send them home too, right? So it's kind of a strange phenomenon where the sick person actually may be out less time than the exposed folks. But that is the CDC's recommendation right now.
Makes perfect sense.
Right?
Wow.
Yeah. And then if the person was never symptomatic, right? So if you have somebody who was tested because they were exposed, tested positive,
mm-hmm.
but never had symptoms, then you can either do a time-based strategy or a test-based strategy. So the time-based is 10 days since their first positive test with no symptoms developed since then.
Okay.
The test-based strategy would be 2 negative COVID tests at least 24 hours apart. So if they had 1 positive test and then they have 2 more negative tests, they could come back. So either of those ways you could do it. But again, the testing is, in some areas is really hard to make happen in a timely fashion. So most people are going time-based or symptom-based.
Okay. And either way is fine. Just pick a horse and ride it. Do you feel like there is some protection for the employer if you pick a strategy and employ that with every person, or can you handle that? Like, we are going to do things time-based and that's it. I mean, test-based versus symptom-based. And then every time you get somebody, you use symptom-based.
I would say the easiest thing, so employment law, rule of thumb, it kind of doesn't matter what the topic.
Treat everybody the same.
Consistency is always the key, right? Consistency is the key. So if you said, hey, I'm going to do the symptom or time-based strategy, and those are the two I'm using, and I'm just not going to deal with the test strategy, you at least then have I know how I'm handling this every time. I don't have to think about, this one's 2 tests 24 hours apart and that one's the other way. And you just are always kind of handling it the same way. And so you are reducing your likelihood of screwing it up, right? As the employer. And you're also not introducing the opportunity for someone to say, hey, well, you let person X come back on the time-based strategy, but you made me have 2 negative tests, and it took me 3 weeks to get my tests done.
Mm-hmm.
I was out of work and didn't get paid, and so I was harmed by that. The person who you let come back after 10 days because the time-based strategy was, a white guy under 40, and I'm, I checked the box on all the protected classes, and now you've got a discrimination suit. Right? Nobody needs that.
No. If this doesn't, I always hate these conversations from the standpoint. It's good to let people know, but I feel like I end up cleaning up the mess later where my business owners are like, it's hardly worth it. They have to be so afraid of, like you said, you care, you're trying to do the right thing, and Morgan & Morgan can work that into liability for you.
For sure.
And it's anybody, their commercials make it easy to pick on them, but.
It really is, as an employer, I think the thing that I see trip people up the worst is when they're sort of going out of their way to do something extra nice for someone that they see as extra nice, right? And they have a different perspective on it than the employee does.
Yeah.
And so where I am the employer and I'm thinking, I don't want to make you come to the office because I'm concerned for your health, but the employee is saying, I need the full pay, or I need to keep my PTO because I have kids who get sick. And so, if I can't keep my PTO, then I got a problem. Or I was hoping for that promotion, and now I think I might not get it because I'm seen as weak, or I wasn't here for some pivotal thing, or whatever. You can't always assure yourself that you have the same perspective as the employee does.
Yeah.
And so consistency becomes the key.
Wow. That's a lot, and it's all fantastic. I want to be sensitive to your time. Do you have anything else that you want to share? I don't want to cut you off, but I know you're staring down the barrel of Inbox Mountain.
Yesterday. So I was out on vacation the week before, and I came back and I had a really good dig out day. I'm clear today. I appreciate that. I think the thing that is just worth kind of repeating is that running a business successfully, growing a business successfully is not an individual effort. And so finding advisors, finding business partners, finding other CEOs, all of these, there's 1,000 ways to find your kind of cohort of people.
Yeah.
But the really important thing is to make sure that you've got a good cohort, and that you're not afraid to call them.
Yeah.
Have a conversation that isn't just, here are the facts that I think you need to know, and in 30 seconds or less, give me your answer, right? That's never going to be a really useful answer for a business owner, because the facts on the ground always make the difference, right? And you can't really analyze.
It doesn't work at the doctor's office. It doesn't work at the accountant's office. It doesn't work at the lawyer's office. If you're building a house, it doesn't work at the architect's office. Like, it really is bigger picture. And to your point, there is there is safety in numbers, and you can't let that make you feel like you don't know what to do, or that that's somehow an indication of inexperience or lack of leadership. It's actually the opposite. To have a mastermind group, or to have that base of advisors where you can say, hey, because all of these topics and management and leadership and how to help corral your team around anything, let alone a pandemic, nobody knows what to do. Nobody was alive the last time this happened. So to be able to have that along with, a safe place to be like, I'm scared and I don't know what to do, because you don't want, as the business owner, you don't want to say that in front of your team. You want to be the leader, but you also can't ignore that you don't know what to do.
Right. And a lot of it is, there's not one answer. You've got to think about, what is the culture of my business? Yeah. What are the goals that I'm trying to achieve, that we as a management team are trying to achieve, right?
And the domino effect of that, because once you say, okay, now you can work from home. Okay, well, now that triggers, now you put more stress on that person because they don't know what to do with the kid or the dog, or whatever. You have to be mindful of the whole chain of events. And
there are, I think the set of regulations and concerns that surround COVID just provides such a perfect example of the way that there are so many different considerations that come into play, right? So you have to think about, if I'm sending someone home, what does that mean for paid sick leave, right? So we have this sort of special sick leave law, right, around COVID time off, whether it's for your own illness or because you need to care for children whose school or childcare is closed down because of COVID. Like, there's all these other pieces that have to fit in there, and you need great accounting, right? You need great HR kind of counsel. You need really good business counsel, legal and kind of business strategy. Yeah. You've got to think about all those things, but they've got to be provided and kind of taken in light of your business, right? Not just like, oh, all businesses should do X. Right. No, it's totally different. If you run a construction company versus a restaurant, your reaction to anything, not just COVID, is going to be different. For sure. So I think the thing I would just remind business owners of is, don't be afraid to have a conversation with advisors, buddies in business, whoever it is, but have a conversation to explore what the options are, how best to handle things, but have that conversation early in the process, because you get a lot more time to adjust, and adjustments by degrees early make a big difference at the end, versus, oh crap, I'm starting to put myself in a corner and I only have one way out now. So kind of that, talk early and often, but really have a conversation, and don't be afraid to lay it all out there, because people are going to give you much better counsel if you've been able to give them the full picture of what's going on in your business. My favorite line that you used during our first conversation was, don't force me to use a flashlight to look at a dark room and try to figure out all of your problems. And that is extremely demonstrative and really fantastic. And with your permission, I'd like to steal it, because it's fantastic. It really is. Like, you're right. It's, how can I help you if, you've decided to shine the light on the problem you think. And it's happened, for us a lot, especially now. People call because they have a question about PPP. And it's like, okay, well, wait a minute. To your point earlier, you've got to have good accounting. How are we going to track the payroll tax credits that you're going to get if you haven't segregated these hours? If you haven't, doing that at the end of the year, is you're not going to remember. You don't remember what happened last week. And June now feels like it was 3 years ago. So it's going to be worse this year than ever. And those kind of issues, like, okay, now and you can do it as you go, or you can clean up the 3 weeks before much more easily than if you waited till April 14th to come see me and then find out there's a problem that you're back into a year and a half ago trying to clean out. It's crazy. So no, you're exactly right. It makes a huge difference. Going back to, it doesn't have to suck, right? as the client, you can have a
feeling that too.
and get a really good result, or you can sort of hand them a flashlight in a very dark place, call only as a panic button, and sort of get a different and less exciting result.
Your peace of mind. Like, look how much better your clients must feel knowing, like, I have this handled, rather than I hope the wheels don't fly off.
And I know that I have someone who, when I call, actually understands, like, has the context on my business.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be reminded of, here's what I do, and here's the
Right.
kind of widget I make, and what my work.
Remember Susie? We've had to talk about her. It's been a problem. And yeah.
Right. So just, having somebody who already sort of knows your backstory, it's like the old friend who you catch up with easily, and who, kind of already understands you. That's a great person to have in your pocket, right?
When they come for tax, Marina says it's financial therapy.
We always have a couch in our office.
Exactly. Thank you so much for your time. You are absolutely hilarious fountain of information. I would love to have you back on. Whitney has been a great counterpart for us, that person that we can kind of chew the fat on and talk about issues and things like that. And it's great to have. And even we, as your business advisors, are having business advisors for our own businesses. So we are walking the walk and not just talking the talk. So thank you so. I can't thank you enough. I know you're extremely busy, and it's lovely to have you pop in. If anyone has any questions or would like to speak to Whitney or anyone at her firm, we will be disseminating her law firm contact information. She's at ADVOS Legal, and you're in Jacksonville, yeah?
Yeah. So Ponte Vedra Beach, just south of Jacksonville. Yeah.
Perfect. And the name of your firm, can you tell me real quick about that? Is a very interesting title.
Oh, yeah. So
before I let you go, I keep promising, and then I don't shut up.
ADVOS, my business partner Gwen Griggs comes from an IP kind of trademark background, and so as we were building ADVOS and kind of thinking about the fact that we knew that this needed to be not Smith Jones and Smith PA, but that this was really going to be a different model of a law firm, and we wanted to signal that from the naming as well.
Yeah.
Her trademark brain kicked in, and she got to thinking about what it really was that our clients value from us. And she actually went and asked some clients who said advocacy and strategy, and that those are the things that we really need and love about the way that you work with us. And so she did her magic, put it in her
props to Gwen,
and came up with ADVOS as a blend of advocacy and strategy.
I think it's lovely.
It has worked. It's been fun.
Well, thank you so much. For anybody who needs her details, it'll be forthcoming. As always, all of our webinars are recorded. They're distributed to you via email. We post them on our YouTube, Facebook, and websites. If you have questions or topics that you'd like to hear about, you're welcome to email me, and we will definitely continue to bring all sorts of real estate, business, and tax topics to you. Thank you so much, Whitney, for your time. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.